In this topsy-turvy world, you find people that are looking to escape in any kind of way that they can. Some people are just looking for a temporary escape, while others may be looking for more permanent solutions. And in Europe, you can most definitely find some of those permanent solutions. But for those who are looking for their getaway for a short period of time, there are many options available. And in this episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, I want to talk about being a digital nomad in Europe. I'm Rafael Di Furia. This is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and roll that intro. Of course, many digital nomads are looking to have a way of experiencing the world outside of their office. When we get down to it, for many digital nomads, they are looking for the ability to continue earning a wage while being able to get to see the world, being able to get out of the office, being maybe even able to get out of their own home. Of course, there are many people who are still working remotely even after all of the events of 2020 and still have not gone back to a normal office setup. You guys are the lucky ones. But even now, there are many people who are still looking at what their options could be for remote work and what can be possible. When it comes down to it, I think when we're focusing specifically on Europe and what options are available for this part of the world, it kind of comes down to two camps. People who are dual citizens of a European nation or a citizen of a European nation, even if they only hold one passport. And then the other category would be individuals who only have a passport or passports from outside of the EU. And depending on your set of circumstances, of course, this is going to affect your situation greatly, as European citizens or citizens of EU nations will not have to worry about some of the 90-day rules. There are considerations that actually do have to be taken into account, even if you are a citizen of an EU member state. So it's not just individuals from outside of the European Union that have to worry about some sort of 90-day rule. There are a lot of technicalities, which I'm not going to go into within the scope of this episode, but they are things that you really do need to look into and really do want to take into account. So even though the 90-day rule is maybe more a concern for people from outside of the European Union, there is a 90-day rule that does exist regardless. But practically speaking, does it make sense? For many it can, but for many it absolutely won't. And I'm not here to give you the final answer. I'm just here to give you some things to think about to help you discover what actually might be the best path for you and things to think about along the way. Among those are going to be, of course, taxes. Again, something I'm not going to go very deep into in this episode because there are going to be a lot of different situations out there, and depending on what your nationality might be, and depending on where you're wanting to live, and depending on how long you're wanting to be there. Because also, we have to consider, it's not just only about your citizenship, but also where you reside and where you actually are supposed to pay taxes. That is going to define a lot as well, because there will be people who might have to pay taxes to a European country, and they're only looking to spend maybe 20 days or 30 days in a location. And then there are other people who are only thinking about maybe that they want to be in a place for more than 3 months or more than 6 months or a year and maybe slow mad a bit. And so for those individuals who are only looking to spend short stints of time in any one place, not thinking about the 90-day rule, but thinking about like, say, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, 45 days, then in that case, you will have some more freedom. And you will be able to maybe pick up and go and move around a lot more. However, if you are planning on spending a lot of time in one location, then you need to start counting and figuring out how many days will actually make you a tax resident there. And is that something that you are willing to do? And is that something that could potentially adversely affect your whole financial situation? Keep in mind that even though we are talking about a block of countries, each one will have their own set of rules and own advantages and disadvantages. For example, for those who might be working as independent contractors and just want to have their own simplified form of doing business, really just working with one business or one company or one client, there might be certain countries that might not allow you or might not be so friendly if you only have one client that you bill in the tax year, because they could have a system in place for freelancers that they don't want to see abused by businesses, maybe hiring out independent contractors so that they can get around maybe workers' rights or whatever it might be for somebody who would have normally a contract to work in a specific place. But then there could be other countries where that's not an issue at all. So this is, again, another thing that you want to take into consideration. And then also, if you are, say, on one of these freelancer flat tax regimes or one of these options that exists for freelancers that puts them on a simplified tax regime in comparison to opening up a company where it might be the case that you can only earn up to X amount. And then if you go above that amount, then you have to start worrying about higher tax bracket or paying different fees or collecting VAT. So this is an area where actually somebody who would have a citizenship and residency, especially residency, tax residency, outside of the European Union and is only planning to spend a short period of time in the European Union has a major advantage because they might not be attached to some of the rules that you might find in some of these countries, but be able to take advantage of their mobility that they have and the tax system in their country of residence, wherever that may be. But for those who want to spend more time in a place, this becomes very limiting very quickly. So there are a lot of really practical details that you do need to look at and find out what the implications are based on where you're from, where you're a resident, and how long you plan to stay in a place. And maybe is there a system that benefits you more? Or even, for example, for those who want to actually spend longer amounts of time in the European Union, some of these freelancer tax regimes are actually really advantageous. And for example, in Italy, you can find tax regimes where if you're just starting it for the first time and you're earning, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's below 85,000, at least of the current year. They are talking about putting it up to 100,000 for next year. And with that tax regime, you might only have to pay 5% tax. You would have then to pay Social Security, and that's a whole separate thing. And I think total, maybe it would come to maybe 20 something, 25-ish, 30%. And then in that case, they apply a coefficient where, say, for example, only X percent of your total income from the year is taxable at whatever rate it would be. Again, complicated details that we don't need to go into in this episode, because depending on your situation, the country you want to go to, and what you're trying to do, things are going to vary greatly. And just before we get too much deeper into this episode, for those of you who have been digital nomads and have your own tips and tricks, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. And if you agree with me or disagree with me on anything, let me know. I'm always curious to hear what you guys have to say. And for those of you who may have never been digital nomads before, feel free to leave any questions that you might have down in the comment section below as well. Anyway, let's get back into the rest of the episode. Let's talk about some of the fun parts, like actually getting around, moving from place to place. And for those who might be looking at Europe as a cheap place to go, they might be surprised when they find that short-term accommodations can become very expensive very quickly. And if you're not staying in a private apartment, or if you're not staying in a private room and you have to have shared spaces, then this can get really annoying really quickly. And if you're looking at working in a co-working space, will there even be co-working spaces where you're planning to go? This is another big question that you have to look at. Not everywhere are you going to find infrastructure for a digital nomad. And then even if we're talking about internet usage, this is another complicated thing depending on where you are. If you're going from country to country to country to country, having a reliable internet connection can definitely be a challenge. There are eSIMs that exist, but if you are working from an eSIM, it's not fun, in my personal opinion, especially if you are needing lots of data. I personally work with a lot of large files, so having to upload and download gigabytes of data can eat through those packages very quickly. Or if it's an unlimited package, then you can eat through that unlimited status and not have the ability to use it very quickly. Keep in mind, if you do see an offer that says unlimited, it often isn't actually unlimited, but rather that you have the ability to use it within normal usage and however much the average user on the network might use based on how much is going through their pipeline. And so what that actual number might be, even the company that sells you the eSIM might not be able to tell you. I am speaking from experience here, having had that happen to me where I had an eSIM that I was using, and then all of a sudden in the middle of my work, even though I had paid for unlimited service, they said, "Oh no, you've reached your limit." Very confusing to me. I can't help but think that's maybe a little bit of false advertising, but that might just be me here. And if you are wanting to work from coffee shops and stuff, there are going to be plenty of coffee shops that have Wi-Fi available or whatever you're going to be needing. But if you're trying to use a cellular connection, then There are going to be places. I remember I was sitting in a Starbucks one time, and I went there specifically because I knew it was going to be an easy place to go to, sit down, not get bothered, not get hassled. There would definitely be some plugs there. It would be comfortable seating. But once I sat down, I found out because it was in a building from the 15th or 16th century that the walls were so thick that a cellular signal couldn't actually reach the table. So I was out of luck. And an €8 pumpkin spice chai latte later, ended up finding that I needed to go somewhere else. And no, I'm not the type of person that normally goes to Starbucks. I actually I've only been to Starbucks a handful of times in my whole life. And I only went there specifically because I was planning on getting some work done. And it was a much better option than a co-working space. Normally, I wouldn't end up in a place like that. I don't judge people who go. I really don't care. I'm not one of those people that says, oh my gosh, you're abroad. You're in XYZ country and you went to support Starbucks. How dare you, sir? How dare you? How could you do such an evil thing? They're syrupy, sugary drinks. At the end of the day, I don't really care. But even though I don't go there for drinks, their cookie game is often on point. But getting back to the subject, if you are going to be going around from place to place, a lot of people are surprised by the cost of accommodations, especially if they're wanting to go to some of the bigger, more well-known places that exist in Europe, some of the bigger cities, some of the more famous locations. And it can be quite disappointing for people to think that they're going to be able to travel around Europe for quite an affordable price, but then see prices that might be like €300 for a night in an Airbnb, or they think they've booked a hotel room when it was really just a bed in a hostel. And I can say for me personally, the hostel experience is not something that I've ever really had an excitement for. I don't judge, but it's not been quite my thing. I like having my own space. And especially if you are traveling as a digital nomad, do you really want to bring your computer, your lifeline to your work with you and leave it? I mean, yeah, many have lockers, but personally, it would still be a question that I would have thinking about, is my computer going to be okay? Is it still going to be there by the time that I get back? Who knows? Another factor is considering actually getting from place to place. And are you going to be driving? Do you have the ability to rent a car? Is it expensive to rent a car? And if you are renting a car, can you take it from one country to the next? Because there are plenty of rental companies that don't allow you to actually take it from one to another. And for the companies that do allow you, sometimes they might restrict you on what countries you can go to, or you might have to pay an extra fee. It's going to depend. It really varies between country to country and company to company. And it is possible to find really good deals for rental cars, but for most people, they're going to be thinking about maybe getting around by public transportation. And there are plenty of really great options for those who might be wanting to travel by train, plane, or bus. If you are going to be traveling around Europe, maybe one of the cheapest ways to do it. I'm not saying that it always is, and I'm not saying it's a great option, but for those who are maybe looking for a different way of getting around, Flixbus, I think it's now in the States as well. I'm not entirely sure. If you're watching this from the States and you know about Flixbus and they exist there, let me know. I heard something about it a while back, but I don't know for sure if they're there. But they are a bus company, kind of like Greyhound in a way, where you can book your tickets. They have an app, and often the tickets are quite cheap, and many places do have their own like local national bus lines or regional bus lines. But this is one, I mean, you can go from Paris to Portugal. You can go across the European Union. It might take you forever and a day, almost quite literally, but it is an option nonetheless. Another option that if you get really lucky and book things just right during the right time of year and book it just far enough ahead or just close enough up in front, then flying can be a reasonable option as well. These days, I'm not as big a fan of flying in Europe as I used to be because, especially in summertime, lines getting through security can be really, really crazy. And especially there are certain airports that are more crazy than others that just don't really have the proper capacity to be able to handle all of the travelers that they see. I mean, specifically, I'm thinking actually really Lisbon is one of those airports that really has a reputation for being packed. And every time that I've flown through that airport, it is packed. And to put it into Portuguese terms, it is often packed like sardines, especially at the food court. I've never seen a table free inside of that food court. But depending on where you are in Europe, you may have a lot of trains available to you, even for international travel. And personally, if I have the option to take a plane that would be direct from one city to the next city versus a train that would be direct from one city to the next city, I might personally prefer the train in many situations, unless we're talking about the difference between a 3-hour train and a half-hour flight. Then in that case, I might take the flight over the train. But now with having to get to the airport early, even a short flight can take you total amount of travel time from door to door, similar amount of time. The question is just whether you're in motion or you're sitting at the airport or not. And then also, when it comes to the trains, though, for those longer distances, sometimes they can be a little bit more convenient because many airports will be a little bit outside of the city, whereas the train stations you can often find are going to be smack dab in the middle of it. If you're going to maybe a smaller area, then maybe the train station will be just outside of the center. But if you're going to major populated areas, I don't know, let's say, for example, Milan, Rome, Hamburg, Paris, places like this are going to have train stations that are very, very easy to get to and from. If we're talking about smaller places, like even, for example, where I've been going to a lot recently when I go to Italy, Verona, the train station is a bit outside of the center. It's not like it's so far from the center, but it's not necessarily so super convenient. However, trains are still a fantastic way to get around Europe, especially if you really want to see things and explore and just get a feel, because when you're in a plane, you don't get the full experience. I say it's worthwhile taking at least one long train in Europe. Not long as in it takes a lot of stops, but like a long distance train that's maybe a direct train, we can say. There's nothing quite like taking a train through the Alps. I'm definitely a fan of taking trains through the Alps. They are beautiful, and especially certain times of year when you have the snow on the top of the mountains, it's something special. But this comes down to maybe one of the most important factors of actually deciding whether it's going to be worthwhile to be a digital nomad in Europe, and that is for the overall experience. What are you looking to do? What is the experience that you're looking for? Are you looking to get out of your comfort zone but still be in a place where you don't have to maybe push yourself too far in comparison to where you're from? If someone's maybe not the most experienced traveler and maybe it's their first time abroad, then Europe can be a great place to kind of dip your toes in to see if being outside of your comfort zone is comfortable for you. And for many people, it doesn't work, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just important to recognize what actually works for you specifically. But personally, for me, I can say I really do enjoy Europe and being able to go around and if I want or if I need, and to have access to these different places within a few hours. You're not only in a different country, but a different culture, a different people, different everything, and have a different way of experiencing life on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the really nice advantages of being able to live the digital nomad lifestyle, being able to experience different places while still being able to accomplish your tasks that you have to do and being able to support yourself. We're not just talking about travel, hotel, Airbnb, or accommodation, whatever you're going to be doing. Work away, that's even another option, but for a digital nomad, that might not necessarily be the best option, because if you're working to stay at someone's place and then you have to work your regular job too, that could be a bit complicated. But I would say for many people, an experience like that can be really amazing. I have friends all over the world who have done these European digital nomad stints, and sometimes will do one every year or a couple of them every year, just because they love experiencing Europe, but they're also very attached to the location where they call home. And that is another factor that I think is really important to consider, even though I often talk about that you don't really get to know a place properly unless you spend a significant amount of time there, unless you're living there for years. It's not to say that you can't have fun and that you can't go experience places for short periods of time. It's definitely one of the beautiful things about how easy it is to be able to travel nowadays. I mean, think about it. Even just a few generations ago, people would leave their country and never be able to really realistically go back, or never even think about having the ability to be able to do so. But now you can cross the globe in a day. Go around it in a day. And there are plenty of people who do. Whether you're going to be one of them and whether it's the right thing for you, that's something only you can decide. Again, I'm not here to give you the answers, but just some things to think about. Of course, this has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and especially a huge thank you to those of you who support this project and help it to be able to continue through the support, through the thanks button on YouTube, as well as the monthly support. Especially a huge thank you to those of you who support this project through Patreon, patreon.com/Rafael Di Furia or rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, as well as a big thank you to those of you who support this project through the likes, sharing these episodes with your friends, and leaving your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter, and I'll see you all next time. Later.